Welcome to Night Rain Podcast. This week we'll be doing a deep, swooping dive with the Guardian, but first some introductions. I'm Evan with Grand. Grand, what is your experience level with the Guardian?
The bird has been my main for the past, I want to say, maybe a month. I think I'm up to about 250 plus expeditions. I'd have to check. And I feel like I've pretty much mastered him at this point. He is my favorite character right now. I think he's the best, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
Personally, I've played him enough to have compiled a montage of myself getting dead-angled and killed through my block. And people want to protect the flock, but the Nightfarer is so hard to play that in the end up, you could, even though you have the most hit points and a shield, you might end up dying first and often. And it feels so bad when the flock has to protect you. The class is frustrating. It's really the hardest to learn, and I feel it's the least supported by game mechanics, and that makes it really a prestige class. I'm glad that you can have success with it, and maybe you as a listener have experienced this difficulty, and you've come here in desperation. The good news is Grand is here to tell you it can be done, it can be great, and he's ready to give you a helping wing.
I've had a couple conversations about the Guardian with Chris Crass. I've played on his stream a few times. We get to chatting, and him and I both agree, and I think he kind of pushed me over the edge on this, but the Guardian is the best character for trios, and it's not even close, if you play him at the highest level. And that's a very big if, because if you are kind of a mid Guardian, usually you are dying first because he is incredibly hard to play, especially at depth 4 and 5. Because of all the chip damage, you have to know which attacks to block and which attacks to dodge, and you have to get used to his dodge. It is the worst in the game, objectively. And if you don't know all these things, you're going to have a very hard time, and he has bad matchups for Night Lords and Night Bosses as well that you have to play a little bit differently and you can't be as aggressive in. And we'll go over that a little bit later in the podcast. Now, I say trios because in my experience, he does struggle a little bit in solo because it is true that he is not the highest damaging character, and his ultimate kind of lends itself to playing medic and making sure your teammates stay alive, either if they go down or if you just want to finish off the rest of the boss. In solo, when you're not putting out as much damage and you have to go through the fight a lot longer and you have to block a lot, if there's bosses that do particularly a bunch of affinity damage, it can be really tough. However, I have heard rumors that one of the first to reach depth 5 when Deep of Night first came out did it solo with the Guardian. So maybe there's some hidden knowledge that I'm not aware of. But when it comes to trios, I think he is the best because Chris put it as he is the ultimate. He used a different word, but he is the ultimate Bush League management. And I found that to be very true because almost every expedition I play with the Guardian recently, I win. And it usually 1 out of every 3 expeditions, there was a moment where it would have ended if I wasn't playing Guardian. So that all being said, today we'll be talking specifically about trios. And if your definition of the best trios character gives me the fastest and most low effort one-way ticket to max rank, then no, Guardian is not the best by your definition. If that's what you're looking for, you might want to look at the double balancers meta, or as I call it, Halo slop. My definition of the best in this case gives you the highest chance of success when played at the highest level, even when the run has been a dumpster fire and or your teammates are struggling. This episode will be more for veterans looking to hone their skills with the bird and really kind of take success to the next level, and less for those trying to get ahead by any means necessary. If you know how to properly play the Guardian and do it well, a win for your team is all but guaranteed. His ultimate ability is the best in the game for many reasons and has saved countless runs for me. I'm actually working on a compilation, and we had mentioned a compilation earlier of getting dead angled. I actually have a compilation of reviving my teammates and doing cool stuff with the Guardian and just really aura farming. It's pretty cool. I hope to finish that sometime soon. If you're not super familiar with the Guardian, here's what his ultimate does if you need a refresher. He can revive any teammate regardless of how many bars they're at. It only uses about 75 to 80% of the ultimate if it's uncharged. And then charging the ultimate provides invincibility for your allies and vastly increased poise for about 3 to 5 seconds. And then if you build him correctly, and we'll get into this a little bit later, if you use the right relic, it'll heal your allies as well, which theoretically means that you could have infinite healing if you're able to survive, which would make for a long fight, but you will win. And that has been my experience. We've actually done one of the first streams I played with on Chris Crass's stream. We did a triple Guardian run versus Everdark Sentient Pest, and the fight lasted 30 minutes. But we won because we just couldn't die. It was absolutely incredible. So if you're looking for quick games, maybe don't do Triple Guardian, but if you're looking to win absolutely for sure, Triple Guardian can do the job. When I said earlier, properly play the Guardian, this is what I mean. He has to be built correctly, and we'll focus on one build in particular, but we'll touch on a few others as well. You want to adjust your build for a few different Night Lords, and then you want to know, like I said earlier, when to dodge versus when to block, and also when to outspace as well. One good example of that is when Everdark Tricephalos does his, people call it the frame trap attack, where he kind of has fire in his mouth and he rushes you and slams it into the ground. That one you just want to super sprint away from, and there's a few moves like that. You have to kind of know what to do for which attacks. People meme on the Guardian. They say he's only good when your teammates are bad. I don't think this is the case. Guardian can not only make up for your teammates' mistakes and endure a long, drawn-out battle, but he can also make runs a breeze by holding aggro and blocking for days while building stance damage, especially with the right setup. This is my go-to build and probably the best build for almost any boss, and is a safe bet for the hidden Nightlord modifier as well. Your goal will be to stack up on HP boosts, affinity damage negation, appropriate great shields, and most importantly, your main goal will be to always be the last man standing. If you're dead, your teammates have been dead for weeks. I think this high-stakes gameplay has been what I've enjoyed so much about the build. I kind of think of myself as like, if I die, I have failed. If I die almost at all. Early game, Guardian can be a little rough, but like if I die night 1, night 2, or the Night Lord at all, I consider it a failure. Putting this responsibility of never ever dying on myself really gets my heart pumping. It gets the adrenaline flowing, which I really like. So the most important relic for any Guardian setup is the Witch's Brooch. I believe it's the last one you get in his Remembrance quest. I used to think it wasn't totally necessary, although I've always considered the shockwaves necessary. But after chatting and playing with Chris Crass, he really convinced me that the healing on ult is just so super important, because if your teammates and you are in a long fight and they're out of flasks, you can constantly get them back up to full HP, meaning if they have damage negation at full HP, they can take another hit, and that might just be enough to push you over the edge. The Witch's Brooch has 2 of Guardian's most valuable abilities, plus some extra vigor, which is in the form of a vigor +3. It has the shockwaves on blocking, which reflects some damage for chipping away, for holding aggro, and for keeping the enemy from regaining their stance damage. And then this slowly restores HP, can just continually heal your teammates every time you get your ult up. So kind of go over the build a little bit more in depth. You want the Witch's Brooch, Dark Knight of the Fathom, which gives you more health, continuous HP recovery, which can be more useful than you'd think, and then even more so, the slowly restore HP when your HP is low is actually, I found to be incredibly useful because it lasts a very long time, and it will really help you heal to full after a flask use if you do end up getting hit. And my build actually has reduced flask restoration on it, and it hasn't really been a problem, and even especially if I find a flask boost during the run. The other one you want to look for, or you want to have on there, is the Knight of the Champion, I believe it's called. It's the one you get from defeating base Feelgore. It gives you a boost to your guard counter based on how much HP you have. So while you're on the run, you want to be looking for HP boosts, and you can get up to like 2,000, 2,500 HP, and you'll be doing a lot of damage on your guard counters. And then that relic also comes with increased stamina, which for the Guardian never hurts. Another one that you definitely want to have, and in my opinion it's a must, you want partial HP restoration on post-damage attacks. The higher number, the better. Because when you're taking that chip damage, being able to immediately guard counter and get that health back is huge. You save so many flasks doing that, and it just extends the amount of time you're able to survive in a fight. A controversial one is draw enemy attention while guarding. In my opinion, it's a must. I feel like it works pretty well. There have been some mixed opinions out there, but you definitely should include it, especially if it comes with something good. If you can find increased maximum HP on your deep relics, that's huge. I actually have one with a partial HP recovery +2, which is super nice. You also would like to have guarding fills the art gauge if you can find that, +0 or +1, because having your ultimate up more often is obviously good.
Here I'll mention that I believe the +1 and +0 art gauge replenish on guarding do stack.
If you can find affinity damage negation, that helps, although this one you can probably get away without it, just because you're taking a lot of chip damage regardless. I believe the +2 is only like 12%. This one I don't use, but it is good if you have it alongside something else that's good, but that's stamina recovery on landing attacks, because if you're using the shockwaves, you'll actually recover stamina. And also if you have Wraiths while walking on a weapon passive, you'll recover stamina that way too, which is kind of cool. And then if you can fit in improved guard counters, that helps because you do more damage. But with this build, you're a little less focused on damage and more on surviving. If you don't have improved guard counters with something else in this list, I would say don't worry about it. And then if you can fit boost your guard counter based on your HP in your deep relics, you can add any combination of the whirlwind on charging halberd attacks, the extended whirlwind. You can add some vigor or endurance, art charge on guarding, art auto charge always helps. HP on guarding recently got buffed. I don't use it, but you can always find that along the way as well. And then Night Invader also never hurts. I actually happen to have an incredibly powerful Guardian build at the moment. I have Night Invader with the halberd, or charging halberd whirlwind. And then I have on my second deep relic, I have art gauge charging upon guarding, draw enemy attention while guarding, and guard counter gets a boost on max HP. So I was able to fit the Night Invader and halberd whirlwind on my normal relic. And then a couple notes on the build. I don't really care for boosting damage negation of teammates on the deep relics, because it's kind of hard to make sure that your teammates are next to you, and it's a little risky to go for because you can get hit while you're in that animation. I do like it for my Everdark Augur build because you're constantly next to your teammates, so that can work really well there, but you want to pair it with Extended Whirlwind in case it's not Everdark Augur. Some other people say Dormant Great Shields is necessary. I kind of disagree on this. The purple Great Shield is plenty good except against lightning. And even on the new map, finding a purple stone in a statue or from the super merchant is pretty likely. And also the new map has a ton of high tier loot, so finding a good Great Shield is also pretty common as well. I've had teammates drop them for me all the time. Don't worry too much about Dormant Great Shields. With Guardian, you need to avoid different curses than other characters in your build. I personally like to avoid taking damage causes X, except for poison and rot. Those two aren't really too bad, but don't stack them and don't do both, in my opinion, in case it does proc. You could probably get away with frost and bleed, but you probably should avoid it, and it'll really hurt if you get Moog or Everdark Balancers. And then I never do Madness, Sleep, or Death. I did run into another Guardian main who said that he never has these proc on him. He actually had taken damage builds Madness on his build, but I don't know. For me, I don't really like it, because if you get hit by like some kind of roar attack or whatever, it can not be good. I also like to avoid poison or rot buildup below max, because the chip damage will keep you below max HP for extended periods of time. I also like to avoid ultimate art charging impaired. You can get away with it, but that relic better be a god roll. And I also like to avoid lower attack when below max HP for the same reason as avoiding poison and rot buildup below max. Now, you might think that more damage after evasion is fine because you're shielding a lot, but I actually dodge a lot of attacks as Guardian, so I would probably avoid this one. But you don't need to worry too much about repeated evasions because you're almost never dodging 3 times in a row. And I also would be fine with near death reduces max HP because your entire goal is to be immortal. So if you're very confident, I would do it. If you're not super confident, then maybe avoid it still. And then while talking about curses on weapons, you want to avoid near death reduces art gauge. I basically never grab this one because even though my goal is to be immortal, if I do slip up and we have a Wending Grace or something, this one can really, really hurt. I like to avoid slow art gauge below max HP, but it's not super bad. And then obviously rot poison below max is not great. I would just avoid it on your main weapon so that you can drop it if needed. You also want to avoid impaired affinity damage negation, but 6-8% is not too terrible. And then I also like to avoid reduced HP and reduced stamina because when you get reduced HP, it affects you the most because you have like 2,000, 2,500 HP. So it will take a lot of it and affect your damage if you're running this build. And then obviously reduced stamina for the Guardian probably affects him the most. Weapons you might be looking for, though, you always want to pick up increased maximum HP. You want to look out for damage negation at full and successive attacks for your team. You should grab these last. And also successive attacks, in my experience, has not been the greatest on Guardian. You also would like to find less likely to be targeted for your team as well, because the more aggro you can hold, the better, especially in certain fights, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Successful guarding ups damage negation is amazing. Improved guarding ability can help because you take less stamina damage. Increased stamina recovery is amazing. Affinity damage negation is amazing. Sometimes you'll find shielding creates holy ground, which is awesome. I love that one, but that one's pretty rare to come by. Broken stance activates endure can be helpful in case you do get your stance broken. And then last but not least, race while walking is so much fun, and I love it when I can find that one. Because when you're in your passive stance, it'll create wraiths and kind of help draw aggro and do some damage.
It draws so much aggro. Yeah, you'll be able to maintain aggro fairly easily if you do that. So when you have the wraiths on walking, that's kind of like your primary weapon, right? Even if it's on a staff, would you use wraiths while walking and just not attack them? Just use wraiths while walking all the time?
Yeah, it depends. If my teammates are like a raider and a wilder, I might opt to not, just because then I can help contribute stance damage. But if I got like a recluse and a duchess casting spells, I'll pick up like a seal with it. I've ran race while walking on a seal before and would just sit in my passive stance.
So to be clear, you mentioned less likely to be targeted, and you don't use that yourself. You drop it to your friends. And if you are playing with the Guardian, it is important to pick up less likely to be targeted, even if you're a character which would not normally use it, like the Raider.
Yeah, exactly. And then dormant powers you want to watch out for is improved dodging is probably the best one because, as we all know, Guardian's dodge is not the best. So finding that can really help, especially for certain bosses. Holy ground on low HP is really nice. Holy bursts on guard counters. Those lost to death on guard counters are great. Glint blades can help. They're not the best in trios, but they obviously help with more damage and drawing aggro. Finding the rain while walking is helpful with your damage, and also the frenzied flame while walking, but remember that will remove frostbite. So let's talk a little bit about shields. You want to avoid any shield that isn't a great shield because small and medium shields have a lower guard boost and they block less affinity damage. The great shields also have different values when it comes to blocking affinity damage. We're going to post a link to Reddit in the show notes with a graphic that will help you with that I refer to actually while I'm doing my runs. But it is important to know at least Guardian's shield. He has 59% magic damage negation, 66% fire damage negation, 62% holy damage negation, and only 53% for lightning. I usually try to find something better if we're going up against Adele because I usually want to block his chomping attacks with my shield and then guard counter. So running Guardian's shield there is not the best. I mentioned before that Guardian has some good and bad matchups, and they go across a wide spectrum. I personally feel comfortable playing Bird versus any boss now, except maybe Everdark Augur. I maybe need a little bit more practice with him there, but I did just have a run against him yesterday with Guardian, and I actually did pretty well, so I was excited about that. But if you're a baby bird or a fledgling, you may want to practice some of the harder ones before jumping into Deep of Night with the bird. Now, these are ranked not by how generally difficult the boss is or how much damage you can do to them, but rather by how easy it is to manage their attacks and stay alive while playing Guardian, because staying alive is your number one priority with this build. The guard counter damage you'll do to the bosses is just a bonus. So I split them up into 4 categories. I did easy, medium, hard, and very hard. Well, I guess 5 categories because I have 1 wild card, which I'll talk about at the end. The easy ones are normal balancers. They do no affinity damage whatsoever except for the trails they leave on the ground, so you'll just want to dodge those. Normal balancers is super easy for Guardian. Normal Gladius, he doesn't do too many fire attacks in his normal version, so you can easily handle that one. Normal Adele's not too bad. He's kind of considered the easiest boss in the game anyway, so that kind of checks out. Normal and Everdark Feelgore are both also pretty easy. You'll just want to make sure that you are dodging some of the holy twin blade attacks.
Against Fulgore, his jiggly arm is also half holy, so I think you take chip damage from that.
Yeah, you're correct. You do want to dodge some of those as well. You basically dodge them the same way you would with a Wilder. You just have to be a little tiny bit more precise. Normal Noster is actually really easy because Fardus doesn't do any affinity damage at all, so you can block for days with him. And then I also actually think Everdark Noster is pretty easy as well. You have tons of stamina for dodging the laser attacks, and actually I learned a really cool tech for the Red Rain that the Possessed Noster does. If you're playing Guardian and you get those homing lasers flying at you, you can just spam dodge backwards, and you'll dodge every single one. And I actually tried it the other day, and it worked. So that's some neat tech for you there. In the medium category, I have normal Maris. There's some tricky dodges, but the extended whirlwind is actually amazing because what you'll do is this might be a little bit harder with randoms, but you'll want to ping and get your teammates to come next to you and use the extended whirlwind, and that'll eat up all the jellyfish and do a ton of damage to Maris. So he actually is a decent matchup there. Everdark Maris, there's some tricky dodges like the first one, but the extended whirlwind with the damage negation is cool for your teammates because they're all going to be sitting next to you. You want to pick up a bunch of warming stones. You can drop those. You just want to adjust your build slightly there, and I'll go over that a little bit later. Guardian is super good versus Heelster. You just have to be a little bit careful in his second phase because of all the affinity or status buildup attacks. And then one of the few attacks that Guardian cannot dodge effectively, even if you're good at him, is his magic thrust into slam attack that he always leads off with during the second health bar. You actually only have 1/12 of a second to correctly dodge the slam piece. I think I've only pulled it off a handful of times. It is very difficult. You might want to either block it or outspace it. If you pick up one of the shields that is really good versus magic damage, then blocking it's totally fine. You can just recover most of that health with a guard counter. The Dreglord, you need to dodge certain attacks, all of his meatball slams. You want to dodge those. You want to dodge his big nuke. But I personally find Dreglord to be super easy on Guardian, but if you're not super used to Guardian, he might be more in the medium category for you. And then the same is true for normal Libra. You really can't block any of his madness attacks, so you want to dodge those. But other than that, he's not too bad. And then the same is true for Everdark Libra. Even though Everdark Libra is a hard fight in general, he's not super hard for Guardian to stay alive. I just experienced this actually twice in a row yesterday. I got 2 Everdark Libras, and I was able to stay alive pretty well and just kind of make sure my teammates were okay.
In that case, do you pick up less likely to be targeted as Guardian in that fight?
I am the last person to get it.
Okay.
If both my teammates have it and I find one, I will take it. Otherwise, if there's only 2 less likelies, my teammates get it, and I just play medic.
Okay.
So for the hard category, I would put Everdark Gladius, even though for me personally, I would probably argue medium because I love that fight. That's my favorite boss fight in the game, and I'm really good at it. But for most people, they would say it's in the hard category or even the very hard category because you have to dodge most of the attacks. And the phase where he splits, particularly in the beginning, can be pretty rough. Everdark Adele, you could also maybe argue medium, but there's lots and lots of lightning. I believe, if I remember correctly, there's no purely physical attacks in that fight, and your base shield is really bad versus lightning, so that one can be a little rough if you're not prepared. And then also in the hard category is Normal Caligo. Normal Caligo is not super hard for most people, but you really don't have any guard counter opportunities. There's lots of AoEs. Normal Caligo can be a little bit more rough. And then the worst dodge makes dodging some of the attacks a little bit more difficult. Then for the very hard category, I only have one, and that's Everdark Caligo. And the reason why I put Everdark Caligo in the very hard category is because the continuous frost storm will eventually kill you if your teammates can't stay alive. So if your teammates are always on the ground, you're going to die eventually because you're not going to be able to do enough damage to finish her off unless she's like at, 2 HP. And then I mentioned a wildcard category, and that is Everdark Balancers. If your teammates are repeatedly dying, it is almost impossible to clutch up in that fight, but that goes for pretty much any character because all the balancers are going to swarm you. But if your teammates are competent and they don't die a ton, and especially, I can't stress this enough, if you give them both less likely to be targeted, it is the easiest fight, except for maybe the worm phase. The worm phase can be a little bit rough, but if you find less likely to be targeted for both of your teammates, the reason it's so easy is because one balancer will rush you. You get a free guard counter to take out like 1/3 to 1/2 of their health bar, and then your teammates finish them off, and you just go move on to the next one. That's how I've almost every time I get less likely for both of my teammates and I'm playing Bird, we win. And you have so much health that you can usually tank the worm's attacks anyway if you do get hit. And then I wanted to mention a couple of the night bosses as well. Artorias can be a little tricky because he just has some tricky attacks to dodge, and then in his powered up phase, you will take affinity damage, and I've noticed that it's actually quite a lot. Dancer's hard because it's the Dancer. Divine Beast, I found to be very difficult for me, especially because of the lightning phase. And, I mentioned Guardian Shield has a low lightning damage negation, so that one can be a little rough. And then my personal hardest boss to play with the Guardian is Moog, because Moog just sprays blood flame everywhere, and if you're sitting in your passive stance, you might get hit by that. I usually either try to just kind of play really, really passively, maybe kind of stay away from him if my teammates have ranged attacks, and just kind of maybe try to keep it aggro on me and just kind of run away. Or recently I've kind of started trying to get a little bit closer to him and just dodge.
Moog is just so hard. Man, I died to him the other day. He can be incredibly hard. And one of the reasons why the Balancers is such a hard expedition.
One thing I should say though, and you're correct, if you get Moog and you do not manage to find the bubble to protect you from the knee heal, if you time your ultimate correctly, you can actually protect your entire team and yourself from the knee heal. So that's one huge advantage of Guardian, is you won't. The timing's a little bit tight, but you can pull that off. And in worst case scenario, they just have to use one flask instead of two. So now I want to go over a couple of the build adjustments for Guardian. For the Augur Expedition, I like to add the red Balancer Relic because obviously the occasionally nullify attacks is amazing, and you'll do a little bit more damage when you're using the Storm Ruler. You have to have the Extended Whirlwind, in my opinion, because it's really good if it's normal for the Jellyfish, and then also if your teammates are next to you and you have the damage negation on Whirlwind, it's just more likely that they'll get hit by that, so that's really nice. It's something to give up for that, I would give up Knight of the Champion, because you're not guard countering Maris, either version. You don't really need the guard counter boost. I also might give up the Dark Knight of the Fathom for the Extended Whirlwind, which you're a little bit less health and no continuous HP recovery, but you still have a ton of health as it is, so you can get away with it.
Plus, you'll have your Warming Stones all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And then you might need to give up something on your Deep Relics for the damage negation on Whirlwind as well. For Caligo, I like to add the red Balancer Relic again. I will usually add Dormant Great Shields because you can try to find the Visage Shield, which is super good versus Caligo. If you don't do Dormant Great Shields, or if you do, you could add a bunch of fire attack powers so you can help contribute damage and get the fight over with. And then adding more FP or reduce FP consumption or both is helpful because you're probably going to want to be using a weapon skill if you're using the Red Balancer Relic. And also in that case, you want to give up the Knight of the Champion because Caligo doesn't really give you guard counter opportunities, and then something in your Deep Relics as well. And you can also use that build for Noster. And on top of that, I love the Faith build for Guardian, and I'll talk about that shortly. So that also can be really good versus Caligo as well. I've taken her down multiple times with the Faith build. If you don't find the Visage Shield with your Dormant Great Shields, just use any fire skill you find with Flaming Strike, Flame of the Red Mains, Candle Stand, what have you. Or you could be a Giga Chad and just play the tanky guard counter build anyways. I have done that, but I think it was only in depth 3, and it was fine. It got my teammates there. They did all the damage. I just made sure I stayed alive, and it was fine. So you can include the Strength and Dex relic for these expeditions if you want, but in trios, I don't really think it's necessary. More health and more survivability is better than damage in this case. And I don't recommend using the Strength and Dex relic on any of these builds, really, especially the tanky guard counter build, because with the reduced vigor, you'll actually be doing less damage on your guard counter, and having more health anyway is better. Some of the other builds you can use for Guardian, the Faith, as I just mentioned before, is one of my favorites. The positives are you get higher DPS, you're way tankier than other casters like the Revenant and the Recluse. You have no decreased melee damage, because it only affects your vigor. And there's lots of great spells for you to use, fire in particular, and I find it incredibly fun. The negatives, though, is it's RNG reliant because you have to use Dormant Seals, and having to use Dormant Seals also takes up a relic slot, and you might have to take up an additional relic slot if you're unless you're super lucky to use the Mind and Faith relic as well, and you do have a little bit less health.
Have you ever found the Immutable Shield and used that?
I have found it, but I have not tried it. What does it do?
I'm not sure exactly, but it does improve your guarding in some respects. I mean, it's one of the random things you can get on seals, which might be interesting. Also, have you tried a Great Bow Guardian? Because the Great Bows generate more aggro than basically anything in this game. And I've seen one Guardian do this, and he just used a Great Bow, and the monsters always just came to him. Have you tried that?
I have not tried Great Bow Guardian, but I have experienced the aggro thing with the Great Bows because I actually just made a Great Bow Revenant build, and I played it. And I played it versus the Dreglord, and that dude wanted to kill me the entire time, and it was hilarious. I actually never died, and I had no damage negation, and I actually had more damage after evasion and repeated evasions on my passives. So I was like, I was one shot the entire time, but I never died. It was such an awesome fight. I actually I posted it on my Metal channel.
That's very exciting. Okay, my next question is, have you well, I guess you kind of have tried Skill Guardian, but you were talking about using the Balancer Relic for the defense and to accelerate the fight against some of these Night Lords where you're not guard countering. Have you tried two-handing the shield, using some Balancer Relics, and using shield skills to hit people? That's something,
like shield crash?
Yeah, shield crash, shield bash, that sort of thing.
I mean, I've used Shield Bash and Shield Crash, but I never like went for it and used it exclusively, if that makes sense. I always used I picked up like a Flame of the Red Mains or something and would use that.
Okay, that's something I'm tempted to try, but I know I'm just going to let my team down if I play Guardian in Depth 5. When do you two-hand a shield, or do you ever two-hand the shield?
I never two-hand the shield. You do get increased guard boost when you two-hand it, isn't that right?
It is dramatically increased, yeah. I think I've seen people do it most against the Crucible Knights, because especially at low levels, they tend to beat you down and guard break you if you continue guarding, but maybe you dodge in those instances. But certainly, as I said, I'm tempted, and to be honest, I'm playing Scholar now with great Dormant Power Find, Great Shields, and starting off with this Shield Grease. And I feel like I am a quasi-Guardian, although I have to say I like it better because I don't have to enter that horrible stance. You have to do a directional dodge to enter the stance, and that often caused me to get dead angled because then you're in a not great spot. That's one of the complexities that you have to manage as a Guardian. We aren't In this episode, we didn't really go over the Guardian basics. We touch on them a little bit in the other episodes about the different Nightfarers. But yeah, we're not covering the Guardian basics, but maybe our community recommendation, you can find some more basic assessments and help you through that.
Yeah, if your experience with the Guardian is zero expeditions, I highly recommend you go watch 1 or even 2 guide videos before you try him out, because he can be very difficult to get used to when you're starting out. Knowing which way to enter your passive stance is one of the complexities, one of the many complexities. And also your point about the Crucible Knights at low level. Another thing that's really important to know about Guardian is that you need to be watching your stamina bar most of the time, especially early in the game. And if your stamina bar is almost empty, you actually need to dodge the next attack instead of block it. Otherwise, you'll get your stance broken, and that's really bad. So that's something that I've recently implemented into my game and is a huge. Back to the Faith build, I like to keep the Witch's Brooch in it because it's just too good. The shockwaves are amazing. The healing on alt, you need that. Maybe if you have healing on alt plus Night Invaders, that can be really good. But the shockwaves in particular, I would say, are optional with this build because you're not necessarily focusing on holding aggro, but you can hold aggro if necessary. You don't really need a drawing attention while guarding. I don't have it on my build. You need dormant seals. You probably want to run affinity attack power or improved incantations. Night Invader is really good because you're focusing on damage, so if you're in depth 4 and 5 and everyone's running Night Invader, you're going to benefit from that as well. My Faith build currently does not have any more than just the base increase to my mind from the Mind and Faith relic, and I've noticed that it's actually pretty low. You can overcome that with Starlight Shards, so it's not a big deal, but if you have something on your relics that gives you more FP or Mind or reduced FP consumption, that can definitely help. And then in my build, I actually have the Mind and Faith relic in my base game slots. That's what worked best for me. But if you have it alongside something else good for your deep relics, then go for it. And then this Faith build works the best against Caligo, Pest. It's pretty good versus Feelgore as well because Lightning Spear is very common. And I picked these 3 bosses because their affinity weaknesses are pretty easy to find on a seal. And then also, we can be pretty good versus a Night Aspect as well, but you probably want to find Discus of Light, which can be a little bit harder to find. But Lightning Spear can also work because I do know that Night Aspect is a little bit weaker to Lightning in his second phase.
In that case, I might recommend the Great Bow spec because then you'll get the Holy Great Bow, and that will make him so mad, and then I'll attack you.
Well, I don't know about the Great Bow because, well, I guess you're not really focusing on doing damage, right? Because I was going to say the Great Bow is not great because Night Aspect isn't a very big boss.
Well, yeah, it will be, you're not doing Rain of Arrows against him. But on the other hand, it's so hard to find Discus of Light, and it's so hard to depend on that. I am constantly disappointed when I try to create a character specialized in fundamentalist incantations. My likelihood of finding Discus of Light is just so low. It's very frustrating.
But when you do find it, it's awesome.
It's okay when I find it.
So for the Balancer build for Guardian, you can go single or double. I prefer single because it makes it easier to fit in the Witch's Brooch. The positives are you get more damage, you get a more diverse playstyle, which is nice because there's so many different weapon skills to use. The Red Balancer relic is overpowered and, again, very fun. The negatives, though, is you have probably less health. You might want to use some sort of dormant power on a relic, maybe. And then Guardian has very low FP, so spamming weapon skills is not the best on him, but, you know, with Starlight Shards or FP increases, it can work. For the build, you want to keep the healing on ult or the Witch's Brooch. Shockwaves, again, are optional, but always good. The Strength and Dex relic is good. I used to run it on there, but I think I don't recently just so I can have a little bit extra health. But you will do more damage with the Strength and Dex relic, so that is a possibility. Night Invader always helps. More FP always helps. Draw enemy attention while guarding is fine, but not necessary here. And then Dormant Shields is nice, so you can find the Visage Shield, but probably don't need to run it here either. So I actually have a funny build for the Guardian with the Halo Scythe. I don't really play it anymore because I'm not a big fan of the Halo Scythe these days, but I have Guardian improved strength and dexterity. Dormant power discovers reapers and partial HP recovery on post-damage attacks on a deep relic. And as soon as I pulled that, I was like, I have to make a Guardian Halo Scythe build now. And I played it a little bit. It was cool, but yeah, I kind of retired that one as of late. The next build is a weird one. I experimented with it a little bit, but since the patch, I don't think it's really all that useful anymore. This is a damage negation at low HP build. I actually have one with 6 stacks of damage negation at low HP with the shockwaves and with drawing enemy attention while guarding. It's kind of cool. It was okay. You don't do any damage whatsoever. But again, like I said, after Guardian got all his buffs, I think it's just been completely outclassed by the high or the max HP build with the guard counters. And my conclusion on it is that it's certified mid. And then this one I have no experience with, but this is the pure guard counter build. This one you would use the strength and dex relic, and then you would stack up on as many guard counter buffs as possible and physical attack power. And you'll do a ton of damage on your guard counter, but you do have less health. For me, I don't know if I'm going to try it. I like the high HP one. I love looking at my character status and seeing 2500 in the HP slot, but it is a path you can take. Now, if you're interested in seeing some awesome Guardian gameplay, I'd mentioned my Metal channel. I have a ton of epic fights posted there, specifically a Everdark Gladius fight that I totally clutched up in. That was super cool. I have a really good Dreglord fight. And then also Everdark Sentient Pest, and one of my most recent ones was Everdark Balancers, where I went deathless and we had perfect teamwork. It was awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Grand. So for this week's community recommendation, we have NerfLordMykie, and would this be a suitable place for the hatchling guardians,
the
fledgling guardians to watch these videos before they're leaping out of the nest for the first flight?
Yeah, NerfLordMykie has a really good Guardian video. I think it's about 20 or 25 minutes long, goes pretty in depth, especially on the shields. I would check that one out if you're interested in trying to get good at Guardian. And then also Brophades, who we have mentioned before, has a really good Guardian guide, and Guardian is like his character. Brophades also has a very good guide specifically on each boss and their Everdark variants, where your guard counter openings are. And I think he also talks about which attacks you want to dodge and which ones you want to block. I found that super helpful.
If you found the podcast valuable, please do review it, comment, and recommend to a friend. This week's Spotify comment is from Eaton. Quote, "Hey y'all, I'd love to see some of the builds you've spoken about in the past, specifically the Wilder Magic builds. Always looking for new inspiration." End quote. Eaton, I'm not sure if you mean you want us to talk about them more, or do you want us to post videos on them? Maybe leave another comment. Certainly, I do post videos often on the characters I play. You can check out Grand's Metal channel. In fact, probably I should link that again and see the builds he's playing. Do you have builds of your Caster Wilder on that channel?
I might have one. We did talk a lot about the Caster Wilder, though, or maybe not a lot, but a little bit about Caster Wilder in our Stat Changing Relics episode.
Yeah, this comment might have been from before.
Oh, from that? Okay.
Heard that. If you want us to read your Spotify comment or 5-star review, create one of those things. You can find us on social media at Night Rain Podcast. I'll try to repost the Guardian Shield info. And for Grant and Evan, I will say farewell. Together, we will make certain the dawn will come.